Hey everyone, this is Howie Ree, and this is my series From Dorm Room to Startup, which is about Duke students that started a company as they were undergrads in college at Duke. And I'm joined here today by Uzoma Ayogu, who is a co-founder of Releaf. And we're just going to jump right in. So, Uzo, great to see you. Start us off here. Tell us what was it like to be a first year student at Duke, and what did you get involved in?
Yeah, so I was coming from South Africa, so I didn't have like a lot of contacts, friends. So I thought a great way to build community was to join a lot of different things. And I was very interested in engineering and using that in like emerging markets. So a big one for me was DEED, Duke Engineers for International Development. I was on the Brazil team, so I actually got to go to Brazil that summer. And then I got really involved with international soccer. So we had a really international team, people from like 8 different countries. And then, yeah, I started a fraternity, which was a very like formative experience for me. And then I was just also involved with the National Society of Black Engineers. And those are some of, I think, the big things. Yeah.
Cool, that's great. So you did a couple of internships, freshman summer and sophomore summer. Just talk a little bit about those. What did you do, and what do you think you learned from those?
Absolutely. So I did Duke Engage. So the first half of my freshman summer. So I spent 2 months in rural northern Togo, and I was working on like a latrine sanitation system. So that was my first like foray into actually using what I was learning in the classroom in the real world. And so I had to work with a lot of rural farmers, people that are speaking French a lot better than me. Basically, understood that technology is seldom the primary problem, but it's more finding a real use case and implementation for it, and things don't look the same in the real world. Same with right after that, I went to Brazil. I was very fortunate, and I was also in rural northern Brazil. I worked on like a rainwater catchment system, and that was also great to see how different team dynamics influence outcomes. Similar lessons to the Togo project. The next summer was actually a big bummer for me. I applied to a ton of different internships. I didn't get any of them. And so I'd asked my advisor, did he know anything I could do? So I took classes. I ended up doing coral research on air elasticity because he knew one of his colleagues. I then got into another program that allowed me to study abroad in China, which was really exciting. And then I came back and worked in a robotics lab for the second half of my summer, and got involved in like independent research. So I had nothing, but then I ended up figuring out something because I just told people I needed help.
Cool. So I think that was the summer after sophomore year. So that's leading into
Yes.
junior year.
Second. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So junior year, some entrepreneurial stuff starts to bubble up. Talk about how that
Yeah,
happened.
absolutely. So I think after my sophomore summer, I had a great time doing the research, but I told myself I want to get something kind of established industry. So I worked really hard on that, and I was able to get an internship at GE Aviation. But along that way, I was at kind of like a career prep conference, and I met another young like Nigerian American, and we were basically talking about how when we applied to college, we wanted to degrees to do something interesting back in Nigeria or on the African continent. And he already had kind of a nonprofit going at the time. And he said, "Oh, you've got to come and join me working on this nonprofit." And at the time, students in the African diaspora to small and medium-sized businesses in Nigeria. And so I started working with them. That was early 2016, so midway through my junior year. And so at the time, Kenna was at Yale, Isaiah was at MIT, and then Emmanuel's at Princeton. I think Josh had graduated, and Toby was still in high school. So kind of all of us worked on that together, and it intensified. So that summer at GE, I remember I probably spent as many hours on Relief than I did at work. I would go to the treadmill. I hope GE doesn't see this, but I go to the treadmill, which was a standing desk, and I would do relief work because no one was around me, and everyone would be like, "You're so fit, always standing and working." But I think that showed me that summer at GE, showed me, even though it's like my dream to do like aerospace engineering, that kind of big company wasn't for me, and I had got so much more excitement and joy out of working on Relief. But I guess it was a good experience.
Cool. And I'm sure you focus that time during your break time and your lunchtime there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Yep. And so junior year, you start working on Relief, and things are going well, and then talk about going into senior year. You end up getting a job offer, and you start to face a decision as to, like, what is
Yeah.
gonna happen next. So just talk about senior year.
So absolutely. So came out of this junior summer, moving to senior year. Things with Relief were going well, as in we loved working together. I don't think we had found a real business model at the case. I think at this point we had moved from nonprofit to like, we're trying to charge or find people to bankroll these consulting projects. But things we were all really excited about it. But I got the return off from GE. I think I got a job off at LinkedIn, and then I got kind of like my dream offer as a product manager at Microsoft. And so that was September of my senior year. And so I had Relief was still exciting. Everybody was, I think, in Canada were both seniors, so he had a return offer from Bain. He had an offer from Bain. Me and him kind of talked and said, hey, there's no better time for us to kind of dive in, work on Relief full time. And so he was actually the first one to write his deferral letter. So very eloquent guy. He's kind of the slick guy on our team. He crafted this great deferral letter. I kind of took it and made a few edits. We both went to our recruiters. Fortunately, they're both excited and said, hey, you guys get a year off, but we'll see you in a year. So that was great. Now we had freedom to work on Relief. We didn't know how we were going to get to Nigeria, how it was going to be funded. We'd applied to a couple startup competitions. We won something at Fuqua, which was really exciting, which is Duke's business school for students that don't know. And it pitched at like a couple local pitch competitions, but I don't think we had more than like $5,000 in our bank. But we believed that we would be able to figure something out.
So talk about in your own mind, what were some of the trade-offs that you were thinking of as you were thinking, like, there's no better time than today to try to do something on the African continent. And at the same time, getting a product management job at Microsoft or at any, tech company is very prestigious. It's well paying. So how did you just kind of weigh that out in your mind?
Yeah, I think now I have such a far more eloquent way to think through it. At the time, it seemed like a much harder decision. So I'll describe my thinking then, and then I guess my thinking now. Of course, in retrospect, like, things went relatively well. It's easier for me to look back and be like, oh, that was an easy decision. But there's one school of thought. Obviously, my parents, they're trying to minimize risk, and so you have this. You've worked so hard, go after a stable job, and then get some experience, and then go off and do the riskier thing. So that there's that school of thought. Then there's the school of thought regarding like, from people who are saying, oh, do you have the skills to execute as an entrepreneur? So, there's a lot of value to formal training. So that's kind of in my parents' camp. And then there's me feeling that, oh, Microsoft One's not going away. They want me now, and I'm only about to develop more skills, work with people I really like. So I only get better, so they should want me as I get better. And then anything that I do, whether the venture succeeds or fails, is going to be like an interesting story, a new set of skills, and I can always use that to get another job or like go to school. So I think people always think it's riskier than it really is, because I think if you're working with people you really love, you're working on a problem you're really excited about, and you are going to really put your all in, you're only going to come out with a new set of skills, some cool stories that are going to differentiate you if you do go into like the academic or corporate world. So I think of it like that. And then I read something recently that discusses people always think of catastrophic risk instead of chronic risk. So chronic risk is like long term, you're doing the thing you really don't want to do, versus like this thing that goes really wrong. But often you can recover from catastrophic risk a lot earlier, and because you're young, you can recover a lot earlier. So I think at the time it was pretty difficult. I did have a safety net, right, because I had deferred. So that was kind of like, if really goes terribly, I can just go back. So I think that would allow me to hedge a little bit.
That's great. That's a really good analysis. I love that. So then you and I meet around this time, a little bit before that, and you end up joining the Melissa and Doug Entrepreneurs Program. And interestingly, you also applied to Y Combinator with your partners and got into Y Combinator, which is awesome. So talk a little bit about those two programs and just what did it mean for you when you had deferred Microsoft and suddenly like something else kind of fills that place.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with M&D. That was really exciting. So I'd heard about the program. I had a few friends I really respected where I went through the program. And so I wasn't like really in Duke's like innovation and entrepreneurship scene. Like, I wasn't in the certificate. I wasn't in like any of the SLGs that are really. I wasn't big in the tech scene or anything. So I thought M&D was always this kind of cool thing, but I didn't know much about it. But a friend had gone through and Cannon, who's another entrepreneur respected, Cannon had gone through. And so I thought, oh yeah, let me apply. So I got in. And I'll never forget, they have these, maybe I'm spoiling, these intense interviews when you go to the program. And I thought I completely bombed my interview. So I was really excited when I got in. And I think at least when I went through the program, they really force you to get rid of your assumptions. It's really easy in college entrepreneur to just build product, but not really talk to customers, not really run experiments, kind of just, I'm doing the startup thing. And M&D was like, no, you're not going to do that. You have these milestones. If you don't hit them, well, you're not serious. If you do get close, at least make progress, then we'll keep backing you. I think even in our team structure and how we went from week to week, M&D kind of allowed us to level up a little bit. So that was really exciting. And then I even think when we applied to YC and we're looking at some of the application questions, some of those fundamental questions about a business, we had done some more thinking about because of Melissa and Doug. But that was wild to get into YC. It was like 2 or 3 days before my last day of classes at Duke. I had to fly to California. I remember actually I came back from the YC interview on my last day of classes at Duke, and I had one more class, and I made it to the class, and I left. Anyhow, so the interview was just 10 minutes, and the interview, I think my year they did about 650 maybe interviews. We prepped pretty strongly. We shipped out an application to tons of different people, like smart people or former people went through YC. Once you got an interview, we basically made full Excel spreadsheet of different questions we had seen it we asked. We went through maybe 10 to 15 mock interviews, a couple of Melissa and Doug people, and we said this type of question you answer, this type of question you answer, this type of question you answer. So yeah, got in, or the 10-minute interview, you're not sure how it went, but you feel good. Then if they call you, you're in. If they email you, you didn't get it. So I remember I got a call. It was my number on the application. I got a call around 6 p.m. I was hanging out around Stanford, and it was an unknown number. So I was like, wow, this might be it. So I picked up, and it was our group partner, Tim Brady. He was the first employee at Yahoo, and he's like, I'd like to know that you got into YC. And I screamed, I ran around, and he just said, I assume that's you'll be joining us this summer. I said, absolutely. So that was special. I can talk a little bit more about the program, but that was the experience again.
That's awesome. So so you joined YC basically like right out of graduating. And you did that summer. And for people that don't know, Y Combinator, it's basically the most prestigious startup accelerator in the world. And some of their companies that they spun out include Airbnb, Dropbox, Reddit, Coinbase, Stripe, DoorDash, the list goes on and on. Yeah, and so for students that are watching this and they just don't even understand like what is a startup accelerator, just talk through the basics. How long does it last? What are they giving? Are you paying money? Do they pay money? And like, what is the goal of it?
Absolutely. So they accept about, when I did it was 100, now I guess it's 200. But they take startups from all over the world working on tons of different problems. They come out to the Bay for 3 months. They give startups, when I did it, it was $120,000 for 7% of your company. And what you get in return is, one, an incredible network of founders, not only first-time founders. We had like Eric Ries in our batch, who's the author of The Lean Startup. So people who are very experienced. People are working on similar problems, but in different industries. And so they can kind of bounce ideas off you. Then a huge value add is your group partners. So people have built like billion-dollar businesses from the ground up and being either VCs or founders mostly. And so the structure is basically you come to California, they give you this money to basically turn your idea. And the company's at different stages. So for us, we were at MVP, but no customers, no revenue. Some people are post-revenue. Some people are really just at the idea stage. But they basically take your company from whatever stage you're at to a stage where you can pitch to somebody and get funded to go to the next level. And YC, they spend about the first, 3 months, like 12 weeks, about the first 2 to 4 weeks working on what it is you actually do. And so they work on your one-liner. It amazes me how difficult it is for so many people to tell someone else what their startup is in like one sentence. And the point of that is if you can distill it and say exactly what you do, then you can focus on the metric you optimize. So first 2 to 4 weeks figuring out what exactly it is you do, then figuring out what metric you're going to optimize over the summer, whether it's revenue, customers, active users, whatever, LOIs. And then every 2 weeks, you'll come in and do group office hours, talk to your different partners about problems you're suffering and facing, and then go back and build product. It's not very glamorous. It's very like work very hard, get advice when you need it, go back to working hard. But a huge value add, and I still think now, is the speakers they have come in. Building a company is very difficult. And after going through YC, you really do feel like you can make it through anything that like going through a startup takes you through. One of the lessons I'll never forget is Drew Houston, the founder of Dropbox, on the first day said to us that oftentimes as founders, you want to spend all your time working on your company, but your company can never grow faster than you. So learning how to invest in yourself as a founder and being very intentional about that is like huge. And that was a big paradigm shift for me. As a team, we started reading more. We had mandatory articles everyone had to read, things like that. So first 2 to 4 weeks, defining what you do. Then the majority of the program is building product, finding problems, getting feedback from your other founders and group partners. And then the last, I'd say 2 to 3 weeks culminate in getting ready for demo day, which is basically, YC is very founder friendly. And so the pitch to about a room of 1,000 investors, top investors from around the world, the Kostlers, Sequoias, ACLs, Andreessens, and other just prolific angels. And YC really takes you through a boot camp to how to distill your pitch into 2 minutes. I feel like I can give TED Talks now because of all the training I went through. And it's amazing to see businesses transform on the Monday, how bad their pitches are, to then the Sunday and the Monday, the next Monday, how amazing and crisp they are. So that's pretty amazing. And then YC is very focused on teaching you how investors think, making sure investors are not giving you bad terms. Any term sheets they send you, your partners will review. Any risky behavior, YC kind of is very, very on top of that. So that's awesome. They also have you can ask other founders about investors, like, what do you think of this person? So you can crowdsource advice. And then there's a lot of deals as well. I forgot to mention that. There's tons of free AWS credits, tons of other companies giving you things. And so I think for the next 3 or 4 years, you don't have to pay for hosting or stuff like that. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thanks for the info on YC. And so after demo day, you end up moving to Africa, back to Nigeria, and talk about what happens over the next 6 months with respect to the business. How does the business go?
Absolutely. So during YC, we actually invalidated our initial business model. At the time, we were like a database for folks to find information about private African companies, so making it easier for investors to make investment decisions. And we just found we couldn't sell it to any of these PE and VC firms. And so we'd been to the program, we'd invalidated our business model. We basically found out we had to spend more time on ground with customers. I think it's very difficult to build a business if you're very far away from where you want to build your business. And so got back to Nigeria, kind of started from the drawing board, to be honest. Spent a couple months in Lagos, which is like a large, like New York type city. But we were always interested in doing work in agriculture. And so we decided we had to spend more time in like the rural areas. So spent about 3 to 5 months trading agricultural commodities and looking at the different efficiencies that were existing. And instead of, I think previously we were trying to transplant like, this is what works in America, let's just bring it to Nigeria. But we got the idea of like, okay, these are the actual problems here. We don't need like a ML model to predict when farmers can sell their produce. We need to look at what technology will work like right now on the ground. So that was a huge insight from us. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So that November, you come back for Melissa and Doug, yes. Our final event, the demo day, and you pitch in front of a bunch of investors, and you end up receiving some investment, and that ends up leading to kind of more work over the next 6 months. Talk about that experience. What was the final Melissa and Doug event like?
Absolutely. So I will give Howie crazy kudos here, because he really was like, I think you should come and pitch a demo. At the time I said, I don't think we fully figured stuff out, but he said, I think you should come and pitch. And that actually funding from, I pitched it that November, and actually the year later, actually, I don't know what we would do in terms of where the company is now without that funding. And I don't say that to just say that, it's actually true. And so I'm so grateful for all the investors and that event being a platform for us. And so, yeah, that money actually floated us along to a point where we did figure out a business model that works. And actually today we are profitable, but really like being able to be in that ecosystem where people believe in you, when maybe they shouldn't because you're not that far along, it makes a huge difference.
So thank you for the kudos. And so talk a little bit about what did you figure out? So for students that are watching this, they've heard you mention your company Releaf, but it's gone through a couple different versions at this point. And so you're still running Releaf. And so what did you eventually figure out, obviously without giving away any secret sauce? And how did you, like, what does it feel like from a business standpoint for that to actually start to work? Like, what does that even mean that it's starting to work?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we found out is the generalized insight is agricultural supply chains are very fragmented in sub-Saharan Africa in general. And there are certain supply chains where between the farmer and the factory, there has to be some like pre-processing done. And today that processing is done by hand or in very archaic methods. And as a result, a lot of food factories in Nigeria are completely underutilized because they can't get enough quality raw materials. So we said, well, why is there no generalized machinery to do this at 100x the rate and in a way that ensures quality? And that was kind of our big insight, that we can develop that machinery that will allow food factories to run at high utilization rate and allow farmers to spend less time doing this pre-processing. Think of it like developing the cotton gin in the US and take it from like picking to actually cotton flowing through an automated like machine. So that's what we're really excited about building. And we're doing that in vegetable oil now. And what it feels like is Michael Seibel had this this analogy of when you hit product market fit is that you're in a boat and the wind is blowing and you're doing all you can do to kind of like stay on course because things are breaking. People really want. It's very clear. And so we have these factories who we currently supply calling us and saying, hey, you didn't supply me this week. Did you supply someone else? Or farmers saying, hey, I want to work with you again because I didn't have to spend 2 to 3 days of my week doing this pre-processing. You just came and took it from me and you paid me immediately. And so your customers will tell you. You will know. You will know. Instead of kind of wondering, oh, I think I have, lying to yourself a little bit. So yeah, it feels good.
And it sounds like there's like a strong feeling of demand from the customers. They're
absolutely, it's visceral. They want what you're making,
right? As opposed to like a lot of entrepreneurs are like, oh, we gotta spend more on marketing, our customers, right. And you're like, no, they're actually coming to you.
Coming to you, yeah. You don't have enough capacity to service them. I think that's that's the time to really think about scaling what you're doing.
Yep. So talk a little bit about Demo Day, which you recently pitched at for Y Combinator, and here today it's April 2019. And so just how did that conversation go? I don't actually know if Y Combinator has like an open invitation for teams, or if you just had to like have a conversation or whatnot. But how did you get a chance to pitch again at Y Combinator?
Yeah, so actually when we went through the program in 2017, we never ended up pitching at Demo Day because we didn't feel very confident about what we were doing. And so we just, I think, and I recommend this for all entrepreneurs, keep in touch with your investors or people who have backed you at some point, even when things are not going perfectly, because they'll have many data points on your progress. And so when you do figure stuff out, they really do kind of believe in you. So we just kept in touch with our YC partners throughout. And when we had found a insight that we found was scalable and people really wanted, they said, okay, you guys, are you excited to pitch a Demo Day? I said, yeah, we feel really good about it. So flew back out to the Bay, and yeah, pitched, and I guess formally graduated from the program. Yeah, and that felt really good.
That's awesome. Just two more questions here, Uzo. Yeah. This is fantastic stuff. So one question is, as you were talking about, I don't know if this has struck you, it must have, as you're talking about the current business that you have, making vegetable oil or the ingredients for vegetable oil, it just struck me that a lot of the things you mentioned that you did at Duke, I think you worked in a robotics lab that might have gotten you comfortable with machinery. You went abroad to both Brazil and to China, and you kind of saw on the ground processes there. And I just wonder if, like, in the back of your head, those experiences prepared you for what you're doing today with Releaf. Does that feel true to you?
Yeah, it's actually, I'm so glad you connected the dots. It's so mind-blowing always. I know, like, there's that Steve Jobs quotes, but there's no way that I did that in preparation, to get here. But all of those experience and those skill sets that I developed along the way, working with rural communities, bringing machinery into rural community, learning how to build bridges and actually increase productivity and efficiency, all completely relevant to my business now. And yeah, it wasn't planned, but life is funny like that. And so, yeah, I think, again, being really curious at Duke and not be thinking about, what's the prestigious thing to do, or like, what's the like good or successful thing to do, but just being, you got into Duke probably because you're super curious, and smart and motivated, and not losing that when you get to Duke, I think will lead to experiences like this, where you didn't do it because you were looking for some outcome. You just did it because you're excited about it. You wanted to learn, and that'll take you the furthest. And I think I'm a pretty good example of that.
That's great. My last question is around, I feel like you have an entrepreneurial mindset, if you will. And, one thing that you and I were talking about before we started this interview is that you're a young trustee. I asked you about that. Which is a kind of highly regarded position on the board of trustees for Duke University. And then also I was looking at like your background and some of the stuff you did for MLT, and also like another club where, you kind of, I think you just have it in you where you like to try to do things that are entrepreneurial, I guess is just the word that comes to mind. Can you just talk about that? Like what is that mindset, and why is it that you think that way? Why is it that you look at problems and you think like, I'm going to be entrepreneurial about this?
Yeah, I think honestly it comes from knowing that, reading the biographies of people who've done really interesting things, and knowing that everything that surrounds us now was created by another human being, like everything. Besides things that exist, I guess, naturally in nature. But and a human being that has a brain, has two eyes like you, a nose, mouth, and knowing that they figured those things out by being exposed to different things, looking at things in the world, and just being really confident about what I feel like I can do. And I guess the term for it these days is like growth mindset. Like that's the formal term. But it just knowing that, especially coming to Duke for me, moving from South Africa, like I didn't have that many, I guess, resources. And getting to Duke, where you have all these resources, like there's nothing that literally can achieve. And yeah, we get told all the time, you can change the world, you can change the world, you can change the world. And I think as you get older, like, you know, the pressures of life and whatnot, kind of, I think we make people less ambitious. And being around other people who are always thinking that way, reading things where, oh, I can do that, I think has encouraged me to think that way. And then, yeah, I think I'm also fortunate that like both my parents kind of always said, oh, go figure it out yourself, versus, oh, we'll figure it out for you. So I think that also fortunate in the way I was brought up.
That's great. Well, thanks so much, Uzo, for doing this interview and for being a part of my community. You know, it always strikes me that every time I chat with you, like you always bring a positivity. You always, you know, give me a big smile, and it's really great. It's such a great quality. So thanks so much for sharing your story with us.
Thanks, Howie. Thanks for being like a long-time OG supporter and being always honest. Howie, never been shy with your opinion. So thank you for that. I think it's very important.
You're welcome. Thank you, Uzo. Bye.
Bye.